And he's correct. I'm not feeling fabulous this morning, which is why I sat while we were doing where I'm usually standing up here with them. I don't know what it is, but when I woke up this morning, I felt okay when I first woke up, other than I wanted to sleep some more. And then, not long after that, just my whole chest just didn't feel right. So I don't know, stomach or something. It may be yesterday when I was leaving and spoke to Sherry as I left, and she said, well, it may be from yesterday is why you've got it, but it may be nerves. Because Deidre Schumann, who was our next door neighbor, died last week, and her funeral was in Jessup yesterday. So we drove down to Jessup and back yesterday and went to that funeral. She had gotten cancer and died just a few weeks after she was diagnosed with it. Because it was... Because she wasn't feeling good. She went to Disney World at Christmas time, right after Christmas. And if any of you knew Deidre, Disney World was her place. She bought season tickets to it every year and took Sherry down there several times with her, and we'd take her niece with her and stuff, but that was her happy place. And she thought she hurt herself on a ride down there, and that bothered her for several weeks, and then after she'd been to the doctor a couple of times, then they did an MRI on her and discovered that she had cancer of the kidney and pancreas, I think it was. And then she was dead within about 3 weeks from that spot. So it was quick. So we rode down there for the day yesterday and went to the funeral at 11, and then had lunch down there, and they served us a real good lunch. And that may have been a factor on me too. Because they had a bunch of vegetables, ham and chicken. I ate the ham. Ham tasted real good. They had a bunch of vegetables and stuff for us that were real good. And they said they didn't want to take any home with them, so when I finished my first full plate of it, I went back and got a second plate. And that may be a factor on where I was this morning, okay? I'm feeling better. Because when I was taking my shower, I really questioned if I was going to be able to stand up here and do this, okay? So it is an improvement. But do keep her family in your prayers, of JR and his children and wife, and all the other close friends she had. And she and Sherry were real close. So that was just a surprise, and she's just a year younger than me. So, like literally 11 months younger than me. So we were just about the same age. So then it was otherwise, other than the policeman pulling me in Jessup, it was a good day, and that was to tell me I had a brake light out. But I'm not real happy when blue lights come on behind me. And then he said, you got a brake light out? And I said, okay, didn't know that. I'll see about it. And I got back, and apparently the bulb got loose. Because then when I got it open, pulled the holder out, the bulb fell out. And I looked at the bulb, and the bulb looked good to me, so I plugged the bulb back in after I had to work. If any of y'all have tried to have a bulb fall loose in those fixtures they've got now, it is rough getting it out of there. But I did get it out, and I looked at it, and it looked good to me, so I plugged it in, got it pushed in really good. I replaced them, I think it was right now a year ago, because when I walked in the Cooper River Bridge run the last time, which I believe, it was last year, that I stayed with a friend, and we discovered my brake lights were out, and both bulbs were blown then. So we had replaced them in Charleston just a year ago. So I plugged it back in. Sherry watched while I pushed the brake, or she pushed the brake or something, and it worked. I said, well, it must have just been loose and gotten jarred out, but maybe we bumped something on the road there that jarred it loose. But it's still no fun getting pulled over because you never know what's going on with the deputy when he pulls you. So I'm going to continue today from where I've been coming from for several months, and which surprises me. I've never really done more than what I did originally with y'all. I did a 2-month sermon when I talked about Jonah to y'all. That we're in Samuel again today, in 1 Samuel, but I've got a whole bunch of scriptures I'm going to go by. So I'll tell you which one I'm going to at each point. But we really don't have a central scripture based from it. Other than I'm basically from 1 Samuel chapter 15 through 1 Samuel 26, which are speak right, is that we go to the last. Nope, it's not. Because we'll do there a verse near the end of 1 Samuel. So we're looking today at what I'm looking at is basically relationships. About how Saul and David's relationship a little bit. And then Saul with God. And then even David and his first wife. Okay? Is that we're going to touch on all of those. So starting with on Saul, that Saul followed along with what the Hebrews had done previously. So we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 17. And I'm looking at through 23. And Samuel said, Though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, and this is important, Go, utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalekite, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took the spoil, sheep and oxen, and the best of things devoted to the destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of the rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is as iniquity and adultery. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. And we look back to Exodus and to see the same thing, which gave the Israelites, even up to here, problems. Because if you remember when they were first went into the promised land, they were to destroy everything, and they didn't. They let various people live. And they let ones live when they'd been told to destroy them. Here, Saul had been told the same thing. Get rid of these people. They're a pain on you. And just get rid of them. So they don't bother you anymore is what God is really telling them. And they go to fight them like God had directed them to do, but then fail to carry out the entire mission. And that there Saul gets in trouble for it. because he didn't have them do their complete mission that God gave them. And that was a problem for that. And that is the point when Saul finds out that he's not going to get to stay king forever and that his descendants won't be the following ones on it. So he is greatly punished on it. Because think about it, you've been appointed first king of Israel, and then to find out, because you didn't obey what God said, that your children and their children will never follow in your kingship. Okay? Because if he'd done what he was supposed to do, then he could have gone on. And stop and think about the things we read about Jonathan, his son, the one that would have inherited the kingdom. It sounds like he would have been a good king, because he and David had a lot of resemblance to each other. So let's look over at 1 Samuel 22, verse 14 now. Because here's another story similar. Because we just watched what Saul's gone through this first time. Then Amalek answered the king, "Who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law and captain over your bodyguard?" Make sure I'm reading everything. "And honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have required of God for him? No, let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all of this, much or little." And the king said, "You shall surely die." Because what we've had is that he saw the religious leaders not doing what they should have done. Okay? And he's called in the head priest. "Amalek, you and all of your father's house." And the king said to the guard who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and they knew that he fled, and they did not disclose it to me." So David, and that was a whole other story of David fleeing. "And the servants of the Lord would not put forth their hand to fall upon the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, You turn and fall upon the priest. And Doeg the Edomite turned and fell upon the priest, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priest, he put to the sword, both men and women and children and sucklings, oxen, asses, and sheep, and he put to the sword. But not one of the sons of Amalek, the son of Ahibeth, named Abriath, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all of the persons of your house. Now, look at that one. Saul is trying to catch David because they've already started having their little disputes. And this priestly tribe has assisted David in escaping, along with David's wife, that I'll mention in a minute. And what does Saul do that time? The direct opposite of what God told him to do when he was fighting as directed by God, and tells them to wipe out everything, and wipes out that whole city and all of the people, as opposed to when he was directed by God to do it. So he gets things mixed up of what he should do when. that we should listen to God and do as God's directing us and not do what we may be wanting to do in personal jealousy, which is what this one was. So here we got a picture of Saul of do everything sometimes, but don't do it when he's properly directed to do it. Because you notice he didn't get his soldiers to do it in the first place. He had to get another group to go and take them out. So they knew what was going on. Through these verses in this range in here, Saul has continuously started having problems with David. And David and Jonathan have moved closer together and become very close together. And so I've got a group of scriptures here of where Saul tries to get rid of David, but he also pledges to David, which is rather weird, because when David could have killed Saul and didn't, Saul then gives him an admiration that I'm going to read in just a second, and admires Saul as king. So I'm not sure if maybe Saul was schizophrenic. He had problems flashing from one side to another side, and didn't know what to do with David. But pay attention also and think about, as we're reading these, similarities Saul to David. Because in turn, David does similar actions. So I'm going to start with 1 Samuel 18, verses 12 through 19. And I don't know why they print Bibles on little thin paper to make it hard to flip pages. Because you go to turn a page, you can turn 3 pages. But it feels like the thickness of one. All right, so from 12. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. And we saw just a minute ago about where the Lord left Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all of his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great successes, he stood in awe of them. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. Then Saul said to David, "Here is my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said to Saul, Who am I, and who are my kinsfolks, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But at the same time, when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Mehoah, in Tripe for a wife. Notice the behavior here on Saul's part. Now remember, Saul has actually already promised a daughter to David. If you remember from the last thing we mentioned last time we were here, when David killed Goliath, what was one of the rewards that was promised to him if he could kill Goliath, of whoever could kill Goliath? It was, if you brought Goliath's head to Saul, that he promised a daughter to that person. So David was due a daughter. We don't exactly do marriages that way now. But he was promised this daughter. And that Saul now says, well, I'm going to give him the daughter, and tells him, I'm going to appoint you in charge of the troops. And he goes on and tells them that he wants them to go and collect 300 foreskins from the enemy killed, or something like that. Okay? And David successfully does that. But notice what he's doing here. He's not sending him out into battle as commander with the intention that he survives. Because it's not like now where when whoever's in charge of the battle stands back at the back and directs it all from back there. Because General Eisenhower didn't never lead the Battle of the Bulge. Okay? He was sitting in England the whole time they were battling that out over there. And that's not a combination of Eisenhower. It's just the way we fight now versus them. Whereas then, whoever was the captain, commander, and some of y'all know military titles better than I do. Because my extent of the military was I only got as close to joining the Marines as to sign on the line, and I didn't sign on the line. But I'd passed the physicals and everything else and all the exams. Knew where I was going if I signed the line for the next 2 years. But then it was, if you were the one in charge, you were supposed to be out there leading them into battle so they could kill you. And we watch certain films of the old fighting and that on it, and we see that. So he puts them in charge there with the intention of the Philistines will kill him for it. And so that it won't be on Saul that David died and can't marry his daughter, but that the Philistines did it. If we go just a little bit further in the Bible, who does what in there? What did David do? He gets Bathsheba pregnant and proceeds to send Uriah out in charge of the troops in the battle, hoping, and did happen, to get them killed out there, where he didn't have to kill them himself. And so he sort of followed along. For all the praise we got of David here, David and Saul sort of had their similarities there too. And it was hide the death on it. But notice Saul was a double dealer on this whole thing. He's promised his daughter to David, and then in the midst of it, and says he can have her, and at the same time has promised his daughter off to this other ruler. And I guess as soon as he started sending the troops off, he married her off right at that point where David couldn't appear and stand in the service and say, I object. But he had David occupied, so he couldn't do anything about getting to marry this daughter that David had questions on marrying also, because he said it was going to make him the son-in-law. And from the family he came from, was that what he should be? But yet David knows he's anointed to be the next one. So then let's look on to verse 25. Then Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king desires no marriage, which I've already mentioned to you, except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, so he may be avenged of the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hands of the Philistines. So I already covered that one. Now let's go on to 19, 1 through 3. And Saul spoke to Jonathan, his son, and to all of his servants, that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David, and Jonathan told David, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore take heed to yourself in the morning, stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you, and if I learn anything, I will tell you. Now we find Jonathan and David becoming close, but Saul still determined to kill David. Then if we go on, and back a couple of verses, after he has gone, Saul has gone and promised one daughter and stole her from David, that David ends up marrying another daughter. Now Saul's daughter, Michal, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So again, in this case, this daughter, we were going, I'll give her to him, and she's going to help me catch him and kill him. So Saul was trying to pass this off on everybody else around. So if y'all had been alive then, he would have been trying to include you in his trap to kill David. Not sure how good any of us would be on killing David, but he was aiming for everything he could. But here, I want you to notice here on this verse, and I went out and looked this up because it was mentioned. I was listening to, like I've mentioned before, I've been listening to a series on David from Hillsdale College, which is actually covering the book of Samuel and the books of Samuel. And they specifically on the lesson I was listening to named this verse and said it's a very unique verse in the Bible. And I've never thought about this before. Now, Saul's daughter, Michal, loved David. And they told Saul. The first part of that verse is the interesting one. According to them, and I went out and looked on the internet and did a little search on the internet last night too on it, this is the only place in the entire Bible that it says that some woman loved a man. It tells us that men loved women, and it tells us some other things along the way, but that this is the only verse they say it says anywhere in the Bible that a woman, it states specifically a woman loved a man in turn to marriage. Because we know that you had the certain love factor of the Marys in the New Testament and stuff, but here that she is his wife and that she says she loved him and then her actions with it. And that was interesting to me that they say that's the only place it says that this woman loved her husband. Not sure what that says about all of these other women everywhere along through there, but apparently they all got stuck with some man they didn't want to be with. Which it did, as we can tell already, did happen throughout there, because they didn't always have a lot of say in what happened. In this case, she goes and tells Saul, I want to marry him. I love him. And so that was a unique, different one on that. And then if we look at 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 2 through 22. So this one's longer. But I couldn't cut it out any. I wanted the whole story. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the Wild Goats Rocks. They named places as weird as we name places. And he came to the sheepfolds by the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the innermost parts of the cave, and the men of David said to him, Here is the Lord, of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you. Then David arose and stealthily cut off the skirt of Saul's robe. And afterwards David's heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. He said to his men, The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, uppercase Lord first, lowercase Lord second. The Lord's anointed, to put forth my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed. So David persuaded his men with these words, and they did not permit them to attack Saul. And Saul rose up and left the cave and went upon his way. So there he is. And it tells us something else about David right there. Because we already know David had been a shepherd. David had killed a bear and a lion with his bare hands. And David killed Goliath. But in the midst of it all, we don't have reports of him being an overpowering person. He just knew how to do small things, which is here. He was a guerrilla fighter, not a military fighter that so much we were used to. And if you think back to the Revolutionary War, the American Revolutionary War, where did we beat the British on? They were all wanting to march thousands of troops out against us to fight, and how were the Americans fighting in that war? We were fighting a guerrilla warfare against them and beat them. David would have been our leader, okay? Saul would have been the one leading the British troops. And we've watched some more since that we didn't seem to always learn that lesson. Because the Vietnam War, we tried to fight big coming on while the Vietnamese were doing what we should have known how to do of guerrilla warfare against us. And even the Civil War, you had some instances of that. Afterward, David also arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My Lord, the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth and did obedience. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of the men who say, 'Behold, David seeks your hurt'? Lo, this day your eyes have seen how the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave. And some begged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, see the skirt of your robe in my hand. For by the fact that I cut off the skirt of your robe and did not kill you, you may know and see that there is no wrong or treason in my hands. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it. May the Lord judge between me and you. May the Lord avenge me against you, upon you, but my hand shall not be against you. As the proverb of the ancients says, out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? After whom do you pursue? After a dead dog? After a flea? May the Lord therefore be judge and give sentence between you and me, and see to it, and plead my case." And it goes on with Saul actually blesses David at this point and his descendants. And Saul does that one other time. And then we'll finish up with 1 Samuel chapter 26, verse 25. Somewhere in this Bible. Which is the last verse of that chapter. Then Saul said to David, "Blessed be you, my son David. You will do many things and will succeed in them." So David went his way, and Saul returned to his place. Twice now, because at the other place, Saul blessed David after David had talked to him. Saul blesses David again, but then back out on a warfare trying to kill him again. And so Saul never knew quite there. Jonathan continued to be David's best friend. And we watched that David and first wife Michal went on happily along, as when he pulled in more wives in there, that he then had problems. And going up on the roof watching women bathing on other roofs. But a lesson for us there in terms of how David kept behaving while being chased by the king. That he still, even though the king was trying to kill him, he recognized God had put Saul in power. And even though he knew he's really been anointed to become that, he continues to pay attention to Saul, even though he knew Saul had his problems. And that Saul kept getting dragged down in his mind about David. That he got jealous about him continuously. But then he'd recognize David is really somebody I ought to get along with too. And so it's just thoughts about how people's relationships are there. David and Saul, good one day, bad the next day. And maybe not even that long a period of time between them. David and Jonathan moved very close together. And were like brothers, it says. And that we noticed also on even David and prospectus wives. That one gets stolen from him, which you would have thought might have turned him against Saul at that point, when Saul didn't do as he said he was going to do. And then the other daughter gets knowing David, and the two of them want to get married, because it says they went to Saul about the fact they loved each other. So just thoughts for you about how we are out there in lives today, and even though we're not walking around killing each other like that, or at least not most of the time, and hopefully none of you are, I got a full tank of gas out there in the car, so I can get away from here fast. I just went by Walmart this morning to get gas in the car because I was running low when I got back from Jessup. But have a good week on it all, and let's continue to think on those. And probably next month I'm going to talk about David specifically as kingship. So we'll stay in the books of Samuel. It's what my thoughts are right now. That doesn't mean that's what I'm going to do. It's wherever God leads me by the time we get here in a month.